realize it was already 7. Okay.
Your mic is off.
You're muted, Irina.
You hear me now?
Yes.
So hello and welcome to the Energy Realities podcast with David Blackman. How are you today, David? How's the weather?
It's just wonderful. Beautiful day in Texas. My cat's happy. I'm happy. My wife is happy. We're all happy.
If your cat's happy, then everyone else will be happy.
If Max is happy, everybody's happy.
Good. Yeah. Same here. If the cat's happy, we're all happy. We got Tammy Nemeth in the UK. How's the heat wave, Tammy?
It's over. I think summer's over now. We had our week of hot temperatures. It's only about 19 today and 60% chance of rain. And then it's supposed to rain for the next week and be about 10 degrees. So like I said,
the TV map will still be hot red.
Yeah, probably, or orangey,
Yeah.
Oh, it must be really disappointing for all those who cried, heat wave, and we're all going to die. I'm so sorry for them. And we've got Stu Turley, who is somewhere in the south.
I'm in Texas today, so you got to love it. We are off and running. Nice and hot. Got a big data center right down the road from me. And when I keep going back and forth between my houses, I enjoy watching all these thousands of windmills, and I'm now counting them. It's really terrible. When I'm driving down the road, I can see how many of them are starting not to get maintenance dollars because the subsidies are running out. So it's great watching all these windmills start looking like, some kind of horror movie. They're all looking pretty lousy.
So they wouldn't do maintenance, even like most basic maintenance that does not rely on subsidy money?
See, that's the whole fallacy of energy in the United States is they've been using subsidy money to upgrade nameplate upgrades instead of maintenance dollars, and it's extra profit money.
Right.
Yeah.
Oops.
Oh, such a tragedy.
As they do.
But today we're talking about global energy investments as estimated by the esteemed International Energy Agency, which said in its latest report, let me just make sure I've got figures right. It said that global energy investment total will reach $3.4 trillion this year, a slight increase year on year. And most of this, according to the IEA, is going to go to grid upgrades, storage, I assume battery storage, wind and solar, something they call low emissions fuels. I have no idea what this is. Efficiency and electrification.
Yeah.
And the rest will go into oil, gas, and coal. And I think they derive special pleasure in saying that, according to their estimates, investment in oil is going to decline this year for the third year in a row. David, what do you make of the IEA's report?
Well, the estimate that investment in upstream oil and gas is going down slightly, and that investment in downstream and midstream assets is going down shockingly by almost 40% over the next couple of years. It should be very distressing to everyone, because that means we're headed for a supply crisis, a structural supply crisis in the near future, not this temporary one we have going on now due to the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, because demand is not going to go down along with that investment. Demand is continuing to rise. And so I just think it's really shocking and sad that we're going to have that decrease in investment, especially in the upstream. There's also a projection that we're going to have a decline in investment in LNG export capacity, which skyrocketed last year and this year, and is going to decline now through 2030. Which that's not so distressing because we do have so much going in right now and so much additional capacity coming online. Once Qatar gets back and running, we're liable to have a surplus of export capacity, probably will, related to global demand. So that's okay. But everyone should be very concerned, really and truly, about the lack of investment in upstream oil and gas, finding new reserves, developing additional oil reserves in particular, because demand for oil is continuing to rise and is going to continue. And that's just kind of baked into the cake. And even the IEA, in its own projections, tells us that. And they're the most pessimistic uh, predicting agency related to oil on the damn planet. And even they are saying we're going to continue to see increases in oil demand every year through 2040. And other estimates like OPEC and ExxonMobil and others is through 2050 and beyond. So something is going to have to happen to reverse that trend in oil investment, or we all better get used to paying a lot more for gasoline in the future, and not the distant future, the near future. So that's stuff. On renewables and batteries, of course, money's going to continue to pour into those sectors because we have a lot of governments who are incredibly stupid around the world still, particularly in the Western world. And they're going to continue to destroy their economies at the altar of renewables. So there's not much we can do about that. Only the voters in Europe and the people of Europe and Australia, New Zealand, and other parts of the developed world can reverse that trend, and they don't appear quite ready yet, having suffered quite enough pain to reverse that trend. So more pain is to come, folks. Someday you'll get there, I'm sure, but we're not there yet.
But are we sure that oil investment specifically is going to go down?
No.
Why? Because the IEA
sure
stress is because companies are uncertain how long the current price spike is going to last. But a lot of analysts, more and more analysts, are saying that it could last for quite a long time, these higher prices, which would justify more investment.
And I'm one of them.
For purely, reserve replacement purposes, because field depletion is a thing.
It is
always has been a thing. And OPEC has been saying for years that there has been underinvestment in new oil supply. But I was going to say interesting, but I'll say hardly surprising, is that even the IEA has admitted that natural gas investment is going to go through the roof. It's actually going to reach the highest in a decade. Tammy, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think what's interesting is that, if my understanding is correct, about 75% of the 2026 spending was already locked in before this latest disruption with the Strait of Hormuz. And so are these numbers really reflecting what companies are doing now? I don't know. I mean, Chevron and Exxon both last week were talking about how the inventories are in big trouble, and there's going to have to be a need to replenish those inventories. And, if you've got these European countries and these, where they want to stockpile and do everything else, they don't want to do that when the prices are high. And the only way to really bring prices down is to have more supply. And I think one of the issues with the investment side is that there's still all these rules and regulations in place. It takes so long to get approvals to do anything, whether it's exploring offshore, the European Union, North Sea, alternative places. How do you get it onto the market in developed countries is a problem, as we've seen in Canada. They can't get a pipeline built to save their life. It takes forever. And if you have a place like Guyana, which is producing quite a lot, and that's amazing, that's really great. But how many other places in the world can they do this development where it can be brought online in a timely fashion? It remains to be seen. So I think there could be governments that want to have the lower prices and want the more supply so they can replenish inventories. But I don't think the emergency has really hit them yet. And until they get that message sunk in, and Exxon and Chevron are too, but others need to also jump in on that. Nothing's really going to change, and these things do take time. So
They
I don't
do.
know.
Why is it so hard for these people who make the regulatory decisions and investment and encouragement decisions? Why do you think it's so hard for them to accept that we are in an actual energy crunch when all the signs are there? I'm talking
Because they want net
physical
zero.
markets, not futures markets.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Because they want net zero. I mean, if you look at this report, it's 260 pages long, which is hilarious considering in 2014 it was 60. Now it's 260 pages long. And I went through and I compared from when they started doing this in 2014 up until the present one. And what's fascinating is this huge, huge part about sustainable finance that's in the report now, starting from say
Sustainable
2023.
finance.
Sustainable finance. And then they go and they list all of the different disclosure requirements in the world. They're talking about how the ISSB is becoming more and more embedded into how these things happen, that the banks and investors in the US have kind of walked back their talk, but the actual asset owners are pressuring companies to fulfill the net zero pledges. And you can see what happened like at BP, where they had the institutional investors that basically had the chairman of the company thrown out because he didn't want to have to disclose as much, didn't want to have to do all these different things that the UK and the European Union are pressuring companies to do. And he wanted to expand their exploration and development, and they got him turfed. So, on the one hand, there's the United States has been the sort of flag bearer for saying, let's go back to reality and develop the things that we need. We need reliable, affordable energy and secure. And then you have the people who are still committed to the net zero agenda, who are trying to drive the finance in that direction, which is why the report is so funny in explaining how great it is that it's a 2-to-1 ratio for renewable to hydrocarbon investment, and that this is brilliant. It's not going to be brilliant when we run out of products in order to create all of this great stuff that they want for society. So,
but it's interesting where they expect this surge in investment in wind and solar to come from when solar investment specifically is falling in China. I wonder why. I don't wonder why. I lied. But in Europe, like 6 Eastern and Central European countries just called on Brussels to give them more free carbon permits because their heavy industries cannot survive. And I talked about that in my Substack for today. And Brussels will have to respond to this request or possibly a demand because there are already anti-EU sentiments in that part of the bloc. And unless they do something about it, if they continue pressuring heavy industries in Poland, in Czechia, even Bulgaria, to keep paying through the nose for their emissions, they will start going out of business. People will go out of a job, and anti-EU mood will intensify, which is not a good thing for a bloc that wants to federalize.
Yeah.
It wants to get more centralized, more united, and it's instead, the opposite is happening because of EU policies. And if they can't grasp that, They probably can't.
Yeah.
Stu, do you think we should defund the IEA? Because we're talking about defunding the UN before
We
we
could
went
defund the
live.
EU too. That'd be good too. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I,
yeah,
I don't think we're going to have to worry about defunding the EU. The EU is doing quite well on defunding itself
yeah.
by
Defunding itself.
any country that's focusing on net zero equals defunding, deindustrialization, and going out of business permanently. Here's where I think that back to the EIA report that you all have had an absolutely fantastic point on. The IEA report, and the IEA report is absolutely very interesting and is missing reality from the stand. You notice how I brought in our energy reality here just for a brief moment. That is a very simple point. When you take a look at year on year, 2026 was down 2 to 3%. Again, that was before the Strait of Hormuz. After the Strait of Hormuz, I'm noticing around the world several different things. The amount of money is, we had Jamie Dimon, we had the banking side of things saying investment in energy is going to be going up. We had Chevron and Exxon, both of those CEOs saying that the oil prices are going to be going up to 120 to 140 very quickly because we're running on fumes right now. I'm seeing around the world more bids. We are seeing more bids around the world right now for extra tanks, extra pipeline, extra storage, and you're going to see a lot of demand for people to refill their strategic oil reserves. You're going to see countries starting to build their strategic oil reserves. Then you're going to see people start really adjusting and saying, wait a minute, I've said this for a long time. Countries are going to break out into those that have energy, those that don't, those that invest in energy, those that don't. It's going to be pretty clear and simple. Net zero is not going to work.
Exactly. And they're going to learn it the hard way, I think.
Yeah.
Can I have
It is
one more
going to
point?
get ugly.
Yeah. Can I have one more point about the IEA report on investment in wind and solar? And that is, I wonder, and I can't tell, I don't know, if they've taken into account the fact that as of July 31st, new solar and wind projects in the United States will no longer be eligible for the big subsidies from the federal government. Those expire if you had to have broken ground on your project by July 31st to remain eligible for those. And so we've had this mad rush over the last year of investment in the United States into wind, but more so in solar, new projects, and get a bulldozer out there to turn some earth so they can construction. And that's been billions and billions, hundreds of billions probably in new investment in solar in the United States that as of July 31st, most all of that, okay, there's not going to be a lot of new investment in solar for a while until we elect another Democrat who's willing to keep bankrupting the country for this nonsense. So I just wonder if IEA took any of that into account, because that's reality. It's inconvenient for their thesis, but it is about to happen. And so we're going to see, just like we saw with electric vehicles. After the subsidy went away at the end of September 30th, their sales collapsed in the United States because people don't want them unless they're competitive price-wise. And the same thing with solar. These projects, most of them aren't profitable without the subsidies. And so, you know, there's going to be a lot less capital chasing those kinds of projects after the end of July.
With all the data centers that are going on around the world, none of them are being powered by solar and wind.
They're building the capacity so that they can, you know, virtue signal that they're doing renewables, but they're actually powering their facilities with natural gas or diesel generators.
I found it interesting that even Ford is switching over. They shot through with a 32% increase in their stock because they have turned over to become a hyperscaler, and they're turning their EV division into becoming a hyperscaler. Brilliant move by Ford.
Yeah.
I thought it was a outstanding move. But I still am a EV fan for those that want EVs of Tesla. I think Tesla is going to be the survivor. And if you want a Tesla, please go buy a Tesla. I think it's wonderful. But I'm not going to, because when you sit in an EV with an EMF detector, those things kick out a lot of waves that are not healthy for a human body. Just thought I'd point that out.
Well, with respect to Tesla, so Canada has removed the tariffs on Chinese-made vehicles, right? And supposedly they're bringing in 49,000 that the government is going to distribute it fairly across the nation or something to dealers.
Right.
But the first wave of vehicles that came into Canada are Teslas that were made in China. Because
Tesla's
I think
made
they're
in China. Okay. Well,
yes, because they're trying to I think evade what Trump had said about, the actual Chinese manufacturers like BYD or whatever,
yeah.
that this is a way to maybe work around that, which I thought was hilarious. And yeah, so this is Canada once again trying to mess around with different things. I just find it hilarious that the federal government is going to distribute them. They're going to have this special formula to decide which dealers get these special reduced price cars, but
that is going to be an interesting exercise to watch.
But with respect to what Irina had said at the beginning about low emissions fuels or whatever, my understanding is that is all of the different like carbon capture projects, the decarbonized hydrogen or whatever. And they talk about the different majors investing in those things. And I wouldn't be surprised if next year they start talking about decarbonized oil just to make Mark Carney happy.
But EVs are going to get more expensive now.
Yeah.
I'd like to point this out. Let me add to the stage here. California extends its climate rebate programs, condemning the state to higher energy prices. They are extending their CARB program, and it is absolutely going to eviscerate the remaining 7 refineries. And they are at 100% import capability right now. They cannot import anymore. California is about to be the perfect poster child of stupidity. So when you talk about CARB and you talk about net zero and you talk about climate change, California is following Germany, EU, UK. They're taking all their best practices from those 3 organizations and dropping it right on in to become the single biggest energy security problem for the United States. So when President Trump stands up and goes, "We don't need any oil. We got all the oil we need." Wrong, President Trump. Go, hello.
Oh, you muted yourself there, Stu.
There you go. Hello, President Trump. Reply. No,
I do that.
California is about to just absolutely triple down on stupid. And how this fits in, they probably use the IEA's report to justify doing this. Just thought I'd share that.
Would make sense to me. By the way, I wanted to point out, I think it's important to point out that someone mentioned these, there was a comment up here, Rodney, companies need to band together and push back against this net zero nonsense and need to all drop ESG in unison, very publicly explain why they have the means, they just need the guts. So most of the big companies in the United States are cutting back on what they invest in ESG compliance and reporting. And on Friday, didn't make a lot of news, but the Securities and Exchange Commission proposed to cancel the ESG reporting requirements that Marxist Chairman Gary Gensler wanted to put in during the Biden administration. Gensler is one of the most destructive bureaucrats this country has ever seen. And so the SEC is going to rescind those rules, cancel them from going into effect, and there'll be a lot of lawsuits over it, but that will be confirmed by the Supreme Court if it goes there. So companies are not going to have to spend billions of dollars. I mean, it would have wasted billions and billions of dollars on new reporting requirements related to emissions and other ESG considerations for every company in America. So that was really big news that the media kind of missed.
Can I ask Irina and Tammy a question on EU refilling their natural gas supplies this summer? That's now a crisis, and if the net zero policies are forced on Cheniere, on VG, on any of the LNG export out of the Gulf of America, is it going to cause a problem? Because if you wipe out the U.S. imports for LNG, who's left?
They've already canceled the methane regulation for that specific purpose, to not alienate US LNG exporters. I'm just looking at Gas Infrastructure Europe, and it says that EU-wide storage is 40% full. But country-wise, Germany is at 32%. Several countries, including Belgium, Bulgaria, and Croatia, are below 30%. The Netherlands is at 15% full, and
Yikes.
Sweden is at 9%.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, well, Sweden has nuclear, and it's not such a big problem, but they still have to refill, and they have to refill to, well, if not bindingly to 90%, because they said they're going to make it flexible, this target. They still have to refill to well above 50%, and they're going to have to do it during the summer, and Qatar is out.
I'm guessing, aren't the Netherlands, though, well positioned to import gas from Norway or not?
I don't know. I don't know where the pipelines go, to be honest.
Yeah. They might not be. Wow. That seems to be almost an emergency kind of level, 9%.
You think?
Well, they have filled up from 30 to 40, so that's something. But at what cost?
Right. I mean, that's going to come at a premium, obviously, with such an undersupplied market.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it seems
well, with respect.
Sorry, and several tankers last week were, I'm going to use the polite word hijacked, but they were actually outbid, and they turned in the middle of the ocean going to Europe and turned around and went to Asia.
Right.
People are paying more.
Yeah.
So much for contracts.
Well, this is what the EU did in 2022 to India and Pakistan, where they came in and said we'll pay more when the pipeline was blown up and the war between Russia and Ukraine started. So to me, this is karma. What goes around comes around. But Stu, you mentioned the methane regulation, and my understanding is that they changed it's still there. It's still on the books with all of the enforcement mechanisms to some extent. But the size of company required to report has been elevated in order to make it so that smaller companies selling into the EU through the US system wouldn't necessarily have to be reporting. But they also put forward a change about enforcement. So there's a 3-year waiver on penalties for companies that don't comply with all the monitoring, reporting, and verification that's part of this regulation. So, of course, the law's still there, The regulation is still there. All they've done, like Canada does, is it's just a waiver. We're going to exempt you for 3 years or whatever, but at the end of that 3 years, we'll reconsider this situation and probably go full on in. But they're basically telling companies, you better start getting ready to do your monitoring, reporting, and verification, because if you want to continue trading with us, and I think honestly, this is the EU way, is they get companies coming in, and then they change the rules or have these things called the Brussels effect. So then you become dependent on that market, and they think that American suppliers will be dependent on the EU market, and therefore 3 years from now will comply. And that's how they'll force all the different natural gas companies in the world to follow the EU rules.
But they're not going to succeed in this because US LNG producers have a huge market in Asia. They have a market in Latin America. Why would anyone want to hook themselves up on the EU market, whose rulers, political rulers, have said, we're going to work to reduce our reliance on natural gas? Who wants to get dependent on this market?
Right. Yeah.
I'm
Why
sure
do you want
it's
to
not
tie
Venture
yourself to?
Global.
Yeah.
So once again, our Euro bureaucrats are not really thinking things through, which is not news to anyone. It's just amazing because, Tammy, you summarized their thinking, their plans and intentions perfectly.
That's why I asked that question, because as a CEO of a oil company in the United States, I would be very reluctant to do business with the EU because look at the UK's windfall profit taxes go retroactive occasionally.
Yeah.
You take a look at this and you say, oh, I'm going to waive the requirement, but the requirement is still there. I asked a loaded question. It is still there, and they can go retroactive on penalties at any moment. That to me is I don't think I need your dollar there, Mr. EU. I'm like, have a great day.
Exactly. And even if it works, even if somebody decides to start tracking their emissions and reporting them and verifying them and whatever the EU is asking, this will make the gas so expensive that European industries will have a problem with energy costs again. There's so many things that these people who make the rules, make those regulations, are not thinking about. I mean, they are not thinking about anything besides what they want to happen. And it's not funny, people. It's actually really, really tragic.
It is. It's dangerous.
The amount of LNG projects going on in Africa, and you also have the LNG projects going on in Trinidad, Tobago. You have LNG in about 3 other areas as well. And when you sit back and take a look, yes, Africa is going to be exploding very soon. And then you look at Guyana off of Exxon's oil exploration costs are $20 to $30. Exxon is extremely happy to do more work in Guyana and actually benefited from the U.S. capturing Maduro, because Maduro was about to just wipe that whole area out there. So there is a lot going on around the world in exploration. So it's going to be interesting.
Can I just comment on Mordecai's comment earlier where he said, aren't the Norwegians pressuring the EU to cut the crap so they can exploit the North Sea's hydrocarbon resources? I would clarify that. Norway already exploits their own zone of the North Sea to great effect, and this is what is allowing the EU to have some semblance of reliability with respect to oil and gas. However, there's currently a moratorium or prohibition on exploitation of more Arctic parts. And so Norway is in the EU, in Brussels, lobbying them to remove that sort of moratorium on Arctic exploitation, because the North Sea, if you look at it on a map, extends to some extent into that Arctic Circle area. And so the EU is like, no, it's pristine. We're not going to develop this and so on. But Norway's fields are like right next to that. And they know that there's quite a lot of oil and gas in that more Arctic area. And so they want permission from the EU to exploit that. And then what's hilarious to some extent, in a sad sort of way, is there's a whole bunch of Scandinavian institutional investors, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, who are lobbying the EU in the opposite direction, saying, no, 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 this is a pristine environment. It cannot be developed. Do not let Norway do this. So you have Norwegian banks and institutional investors lobbying against their own country to increase, in order to protect the Arctic. But what's interesting is that if you look at who's developing up there, Russia's making advances into potentially exploiting that area more. There's some talk about offshore Greenland, which I think David and Stu probably know more about than I do. But that's the state about that portion of the North Sea and what Norway's pushing for.
Interesting. Yeah, it's insane for the United States and Canada to be foregoing exploration of the Arctic when Russia is going full bore ahead, and actually in partnership with some American companies, or at least a couple of American companies are trying to get back in there after having left due to the
there's
war
a
in
lot of oil
Ukraine.
and gas there, David.
Yes, there's billions and billions of potential resource there, I mean, and offshore Alaska, offshore Canada as well in the Arctic. And it's hard. It's expensive to explore in those areas, but it pays out pretty damn fast just because of the rate of production once you come online. So, it's kind of surrendering strategically if you don't compete with Russia in that province. And, the countries that don't do it are going to pay a price in the long run.
Well, it's sad that, Canada has tried to exploit its Arctic region since the early 1970s, and it's always been fraught. And part of the problem is not just the expense, is how do you get it out? Like through pipeline, through tanker. Then there was the concerns with tankers. Then how are you going to build these pipelines? Who's going to pay for it? And in Canada, it always comes down to who's going to pay for it. So
nobody wants
to pay for it.
Of course not. Yeah. Well,
it's expensive and you need guarantees, and the prices are always volatile. So what's in it for a company to get this high expense oil and gas down to the south where the demand is? It's expensive, and who's going to want to pay for it if the prices collapse?
Right. Yeah. We're trying in the United States to open up Alaska.
Again.
The problem comes though, we have the petroleum reserve on the North Slope, but the companies are eager to get into and invest, but they're also, trying to go through this kabuki theater about reopening the Arctic National Wildlife Reserve, a small sliver of it for oil and gas exploration. There's just maybe a handful of companies that would even try to do that, because the American system is so unpredictable from election to election. And just getting to first production in a province like that is 7 to 10 year prospect, and you could go through 3 different presidencies during that time with both parties, and, all the back and forth, not just politically, but in the legal system. Yeah. So it's really hard to try to do that, but you get offshore and it becomes much easier, at least in terms of the politics of it. And that's really where the biggest rewards are going to be up there anyway. So I hope, actually, my personal feeling is I hope no companies bid on leases in ANWR, because it's so politically fraught, and it gives a black eye to the whole industry when you're up there doing it. If you have any kind of a spill whatsoever, it just becomes a real damaging thing for the whole industry. And I just wish companies would shy away from that.
MD Bone brings up a great point, and that is back to net zero and policies. The Marcellus is one of the best natural gas plays that we need, but yet we can't get pipelines built pipelines in Pennsylvania and New York and back east are impossible thanks to net zero. So yes, Marcellus needs a way out. And oh,
Yeah.
by the way, that would be fantastic if they put a liquefaction plant right there on the, Pacifics or the Atlantic side and let, oh, by the way, we could sell to Europe. Oh, but we'd have to count each molecule's methane. So but then you look at Texas. Texas has now got more natural gas pipelines coming in than anywhere else in the United States, and it's kind of like no wonder everybody's moving to Texas.
Yeah,
I just wish
2/3 of the
everybody would leave
pipeline
their.
investment in the country is in Texas.
Yep, I just wish everybody would leave their voting policies elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, in the Marcellus, we do have that pipeline going south, right? That is about to either has already come online or is about to. That's going to take gas down to the, I think, South Carolina and lower on the eastern seaboard. But we don't have any outlet to New England, which is, another potentially huge market for Marcellus gas that could save utility ratepayers tons of money every year on their gas bills and their electricity bills, not having to import LNG from Russia and Algeria and all these crazy places. I assume the suspension of the Jones Act will help relieve that situation somewhat if it extends into the wintertime, but it's tough. It's really tough to get anything across the state of New York into New England. And
now that would be absolutely a hoot, David, if the U.S. intercepted its own tanker that comes in, that we rent a tanker that is flagged from Russia, and because they've got tankers, that we've used before, go figure that out. So an LNG tanker from Russia that fills up in the Gulf of the United of America, and then we steal it as it's going to Europe so that it could go to Boston to fill up. Nice. I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. The absurdity of the politics is, yeah.
And I find it very funny that you take a look at the outlets up the LNG output up in Alaska is actually, or not Alaska, but the Arctic from Russia is doing quite well. I mean, it's paying for itself even under sanctions. More power to them.
A lot of demand. Got to have it.
I think we wiped out Irina.
I thought Trump said that he made some kind of deal with New York about the pipeline. What happened?
They made a trade. So yeah, he had let the Empire Wind project go to completion in a deal with Kathy Hochul to get an expansion of a natural gas pipeline into New York Harbor to distribute gas there on Manhattan. And that's underway now. That's being built, but it apparently did not include any sort of an interstate pipeline across New York from the Marcellus to New England. And so that remains blocked by Governor Hochul. And, I don't see much action in the Trump administration to force it to completion. And so, we're liable to end up at the end of this administration still with no pipeline into New England from the Marcellus, which is insane. Just absolutely insane.
I want to share this comment from Steve Smith. I don't know who Steve Smith is,
I was
but
wondering about this comment as well. Yeah.
the environment belongs to all of us, not oil companies. I'm assuming is what it was going to type. But yes, I couldn't agree more. But there is scientific proof that if people will listen, that solar panels in Texas last 15 minutes. When you have a hailstorm come rolling through, they're more damaging for the environment than natural gas plants or nuclear plants or coal plants. So renewable is only wind and sun that is renewable part. Nothing else about that ecosystem is renewable, and they are more damaging for the environment than an oil company. Fact. So thanks for making that comment, Steve.
But just as a general thing, we probably all agree with that statement. It belongs to
we
all
do.
of us, not just oil companies.
It's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Irina, I wanted to get your take on the little section on the European Union where they have their regional insights, and what you thought about the doubling down on net zero and electrification, and that one of the elements, if I can pull it up on my report here, where it talks about support resource diversification. And I'm wondering what you made of those insights for the region.
What constitutes resource diversification in the current context? I'm afraid to ask, but I suppose it would be more wind and solar, or gas from Algeria, which can produce it in sufficient volumes. I think this is all general statements. It's the same old song. They just keep saying the same thing, both the IEA and the EU. Even when the environment, the political, geopolitical, economic, financial environment changes, they keep saying the same thing as if nothing has changed. We're going to invest more in grid upgrades. We're going to invest more in interconnections. We're going to build more wind. We're going to build more solar. Well, no, you cannot do this on your own. You have to have companies do it. And companies don't want to spend the money because it's a lot of money. And you, the politicians, the governments, are running out of money for subsidies because you have an energy crisis on your hand, because you have a diesel shortage. Russia just banned diesel exports. That's great. Russia accounts for 40% of global diesel exports.
Oh my gosh.
We have a diesel shortage. It's going to hit in a few weeks. Exxon and Chevron, as you mentioned, Tammy, are warning that globally oil is going to be in short supply in a few weeks, by July.
Yep.
Without this, without gas, without diesel, without oil, you cannot do everything that you promised to do with other people's money. It's just not happening, but nobody cares. None of these people, no one at the IEA, well, maybe the people who actually do the number crunching care, but Fatih Birol doesn't care, Ursula von der Leyen doesn't care. Their job seems to be to just talk. Just, spew empty words.
Announcements.
Yeah.
Like Carney. It's endless announcements.
It like it's action. It's not action. It's not.
Yeah. Lots of smiles and announcements, and we're promising this and we're promising that. And it's like, well, when is it ever going to happen? Because it's so short on action.
How? Yeah. How is it going to happen?
How?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that gets us back to this IEA report, because I'm sure all of you remember it's only been 3 years ago since that McKinsey report came out saying the cost of the energy transition from fossil fuels to renewables is going to cost at least $300 trillion between 2023 and 2050. And we're going to need at least $9 trillion of investments every year for those 27 years in renewable projects and infrastructure to get there. And yet the IEA now says the total investment in all energy types is going to be $3.4 trillion. Not just renewables, all energy types. And at least $1 trillion of that's going to be in oil, gas, and coal. So, I think we get to the point where you have to recognize that even the people talking about this know they're not doing it. It's not going to succeed. It's all a joke. It's all just a money grab that, they themselves and the people that they have personal relationships and political relationships are benefiting from. That's what this is. And unfortunately, most people in our general populations don't have the wherewithal in terms of education or information to make the connections on all those data points. But I mean, we've gone from needing $9 trillion a year in renewables alone to 3.4 trillion in all energy types. And that isn't going to get you to net zero. Not that it was ever possible to do in the first place, but I mean, it's just, there's been a surrender on that end. They just haven't talked about it yet.
Yeah.
Let me just have one little piece of fun here. Steve Smith, fossil fuels get billions in subsidies every year.
Oh my
I'm
God.
going to
God,
post
just ban that.
Hang
idiot.
on, David.
Come on, that's so stupid and false.
Would you?
Just
Okay,
drives me
let me
nuts.
put this one up here. Steve, tax incentives are different than subsidies. You need to learn the difference. You have to make money to get a tax incentive. Subsidies are paid from taxpayers. Thank you, David. I was just trying to prove that point there.
Thank you. Thank you,
I
Steve.
think Steve has very strong feelings about the whole thing since he said we all deserve cancer. And I understand strong feelings, but we might want to channel them in more appropriate ways.
For some reason, I can't block him, so I'm not worried about him. I just wanted to prove that point and then have that discussion in there that there is a difference, and people need to understand that subsidies are different, and we have been subsidizing the wind and solar for 50 years, and we have spent $10 trillion on wind, solar, and hydrogen. Of the $10 trillion, we've only gained 3%. I did a little exercise on one of my podcasts that I put out on Friday. For that $10 trillion, we could have put in all of the nuclear reactors. There's 94 nuclear reactors in the United States. For $10 trillion, we could have put in 2,000 nuclear reactors. So we could have put in another 175 nuclear reactors in the United States, gotten rid of all wind and solar, been carbon zero for our entire grid, and then been able to fund another 1,700 nuclear reactors for the rest of the world. That's how much we've spent on wind and solar.
I'd like to make a note about a great comment by Mordecai. Thank you. Can they do force majeure on the net zero thing at least until Hormuz stabilizes? Don't they have anything like that to cover their backsides at least? No, they do not. Any admission that net zero plans have to be put on hold because there's no money and there's no oil and there's no gas to fuel it would be an admission of failure. And I know Mordecai, and any sane person would say, so what? Things happen, things change. You can admit you were wrong. No, these people cannot. They will quite literally politically die on that hill of net zero. No going back, except on things like the methane regulation. Yeah, we are keeping it. It's there. We're just giving you a 3-year waiver or something, and then we'll decide if we're going to enforce it. So they're not going to do that.
I would add to what Irina said. I agree completely. Is that you could almost say they're sort of doing force majeure by the tweaking they're doing on all the different policies, right? So right. So you have like the corporate sustainability due diligence directive. So they've made that so it's only super huge companies have to do it, and they don't have to follow as many data points. So they're tweaking the policies they know are restricting competitiveness. They're tweaking the policies they know are increasing prices, but they're not getting rid of them. Because like Irina said, if they got rid of them, they'd have to admit failure, and they can't do that. Their egos are so huge. They've gone so far that they can't walk away now. And even though the Strait of Hormuz issue, the Russia attack on Ukraine issue offered an off-ramp for these things. And instead of taking the off down on it, like right now, there's this huge debate in the UK Parliament about developing the North Sea, like to open it up, because right now they've said no more new stuff. We're going to phase out the ones that are already there. And so now there's talk of Keir Starmer going. There are these people who want to replace him. And Wes Streeting, who was the health minister, who resigned from cabinet and wants to be leader now, he said, well, I would open up new oil and gas developments in the North Sea. And I know Ed Miliband will come around eventually. And I'm thinking, really? When hell freezes over? So there's talk, there's tweaking, whatever. This is the potential to have an off ramp. They're choosing not to take it. And I don't know. It's like everything has to get so bad. People really need to suffer before the politicians will back off.
Exactly, because then they feel, the change breathing down their necks, and
Right.
the possibility that they might not be re-elected. Steve, making governments clean up spills and dumplings. Subsidies.
Dumplings.
Steve, BP got a bill of over $60 billion for the Deepwater Horizon disaster, which was a massive disaster. And the company was made to pay for it.
Yeah, they've never recovered from that, actually.
Exactly. And that's fair.
I'm not sure what kind of dumplings we're talking
clean
about.
It up. So, no, that's just not true. Not saying they're responsible and nice, but
Rodney McInnes made a good point here. It's very easy to disprove climate alarmism claims. Perhaps companies affected by climate mandates can launch preemptive defenses in court against those who've maligned and damaged their businesses. Thoughts? Well, it could start with Steve Smith. But, thinking these companies, these big oil companies are ever going to do anything like this, they're still caught up in many ways in the ESG madness. I mean, they're reducing things, but you listen to their talking points and they're still, not quite there yet in terms of doing something like taking any preemptive action. And besides, if they all attempt to do that, they'd be prosecuted under the antitrust laws of the United States. So puts them at a little bit of a disadvantage.
oh well.
And those are good laws, by the way. I'm not saying they shouldn't exist.
Yeah. I just think it's hilarious, how they're trying to spin it, that using oil and gas creates health effects and negative health effects. Actually, using oil and gas has reduced indoor air pollution that has saved millions of lives across the world.
And coal use to some extent.
Yeah. And like, these claims are just so baseless. It's unfortunate.
Talking points. Well, any concluding remarks?
Yeah, Steve is from Clearwater, Florida.
So, he's a Florida
I hope he has
man?
a great day. Do what?
He's a Florida man.
Yeah, he's
Florida
a Florida
man.
man.
Florida
Floridian.
man says you should all get cancer.
Yes. I hope he has a great life. Anyway, I do not care about him. I just thought it was very interesting. I do appreciate you guys as being energy leaders and having a lot of fun.
Oh, it's always fun, if nothing else.
It's always fun. I would say to just wrap up on the IEA report, I thought the climate finance, sustainable finance section was really interesting, especially since 2022, I think it is. They've had a representative from GFANZ consult on that section of the report. So GFANZ, everyone thinks is dead. Their guy was still helping write that section this year, as he has. It's the same person for the past 3 or 4 years. And I would say that ESG has not derailed. It's just gone on a different, more institutionally embedded track. It's still there. The companies are still doing it. And I worry about what California's brought in, because they brought in climate disclosures. I think this is the first year, maybe next year will be the time for them to force any company dealing in California to do this reporting. So even though, as David said, the SEC has removed the climate risk disclosures as being mandatory for all companies, California's bringing it in. So we'll see what'll happen going forward.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. They're about to elect a new governor. Javier Becerra is most likely going to be their next governor out there, and he's making a lot of noises as being kind of a heretic on all their crazy climate laws. I'm sure it's just talk for the campaign, but who knows? Maybe he's serious.
Yeah, should be interesting.
Bye, y'all.
Well, have a great week. Thanks for almost all the comments.